Emily's Garden by B.S. Productions. Emily was a private engine who worked carrying important people to important places. However, this did not make her self-important. Instead, what she would do is talk to the people she transported, and she ended up gaining contacts in places far, far away. Her favorite of these contacts was an old married couple named Harold Stewart and Ruth Stewart, along with two little children, Gavin and Maisie. For many years, she would pull them around to all the places they needed to go. However, hard times came. Newer, larger, and stronger steam engines arrived and took Emily's place. This made her very sad indeed. However, the Stewarts cared about Emily, and so they purchased her and made her the centerpiece in their big garden. They had to transport her to the garden via horse and cart, something she found to be very demeaning.
"Why must I have to travel by such inferior modes of transportation?"
she would grumble. However, the horses really paid no mind. Emily was lifted off the carts and placed onto a set of track with buffers on each end. Then a shed was built over her to keep any rain from spoiling her paint. However, the walls were missing, so that way people could see her. While Emily did miss stretching her wheels, it was nice to be able to see Gavin and Maisie all the time. Every day, the two young children would come outside and ask Emily all sorts of questions. Emily would tell them stories until either her voice started aching or their mom would call them in for dinner. But right after dinner was finished, they would come right back outside again and ask for more stories. But as the children grew, so too did the time it took them to come back to Emily. As they got older, they spent less and less time with her, until she was alone most of the week, then most of the month, and then most of the year. One day, Maisie came back to Emily for one final time and said,
"I'm sorry, Emily, but we are moving out. We won't be seeing you again."
Emily became depressed and wondered what she would do with all of the new free time she was granted. She tried to be optimistic, but it didn't work. On day one, she felt the weight of never seeing anyone ever again. She wasn't able to sleep for several nights, thinking about how much she would miss her dear friends. At night, she would stare up into the stars, praying for sleep. And during the day, she would look around at the garden, remembering all the good times that she used to have. She remembered the lavish balls that Mr. Stewart would throw. They used to use her as a grill. She remembered the picnics where Gavin and Maisie would invite their friends from the local school over to have lunch. The more she remembered, the sadder she became, and the more she wished that somebody, anybody, would come back and talk to her one last time. It took 30 years of being stuck in the garden. However, eventually, Maisie came back. She apologized for not speaking to Emily in so long. Emily was simply glad she was there at all. Maisie had good news. She explained that a railway on an island called Sodor had bought Emily and was going to restore her to running condition. Emily was ecstatic. She hadn't moved in decades, but the idea of going to a railway where she could have constant work brightened her mood so much that she didn't care. She asked Maisie question after question after question, much mirroring the way Maisie would ask question after question after question back in the good old days. Maisie answered each question happily, much like Emily used to. Within a week, Gavin came with a new device called a low loader truck, and Emily was shipped off by road to the island of Sodor. She grumbled dreadfully about having to ride on the road. Once she finally got to Sodor, however, things were a whole different story very fast. There were engines of all shapes and sizes moving around, and many in the workshop she was sent to. She found the large black tender engine with 10 driving wheels quite intimidating, and yet rather intriguing. The workmen were amazed to get to work alongside such a historic piece of machinery. Emily was as humble as she could be. She was out of the workshop before she knew it, and was pulling trains along the main line. But I mustn't say any more, or I shall spoil the next story.